Hello and welcome to Daily Politics on Trust TV. On this program, we discuss issues around politics, policy and governance. I am Shafiu Suleiman. President Muhammadu Buhari's administration came to power in 2015 with a promise to address the Boko Haram insurgency at that time, to improve the nation's economy and aggressively fight corruption. 7 years and counting, how has this administration fared in delivering on these key promises? Is Nigeria now better off when compared with where it was in 2015? To provide answers to this, we have in the studio the Senior Special Assistant to President Muhammadu Buhari on Media and Publicity, Malam Garba Shehu. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for this privilege.
Right. Okay, before we commence the discussion, we'll take a short break. Stay with us. Thank you very much for staying with us on Daily Politics. And today, our talking point is President Muhammadu Buhari's government in retrospect. And we have in the studio, just like I said earlier, the Senior Special Assistant to President Muhammadu Buhari on Media and Publicity, Malam Garba Shehu. Once again, welcome to the program.
Thank you and congratulations on your first anniversary.
We really appreciate that. Right. Okay, let's start with the most recent development, for instance, in the power sector. There has been issues around, the frequent grid collapse. This one was actually strike-induced, so to speak, the one that happened just recently. It was said to be as a result of some challenges around the high cost of diesel and so on, the PMS and so on. How is the government finding this disturbing scenario, looking at the fact that power is very critical to sustaining economic development?
Some of these technical incidents are sad and unfortunate because they tend to take away from the massive strides that the administration has achieved. As we speak today, this administration has been able to raise generation capacity to between 15 to 16 megawatts. No, 15 to 16,000 megawatts.
Right, that's it.
This wasn't so when the administration came in. It hovered at about 4 to 5, and actual delivery at about 2,500 megawatts. So the problem we have in the country today is between that massive amount of, how to deliver that massive amount of power to the consumer, to our homes, to factories. So transmission has significantly improved also, because we are talking about between 7,000 to 8,000 megawatts capacity.
That's transmission?
Yes.
Okay.
But the offtake is where the problem is.
Yes.
Because that part of the value chain has been sold 100% to private sector. Of course, government is a minority shareholder with the power to sanction, as was invoked recently in a number of discourse. However, I guess the sense we have is that the discourse heavily fortified by the law, they're protected. They are not able to generate the kind of investment that is needed, for instance, to provide meters And because government insists they must pay for power that they take, and they, for their part, they don't have the meter and how to collect back money from consumers. So they decline to take power. So it's an ironic situation. Massive amount of power available, no off-takers, because this core will not accept power.
Because they're lacking the capacity also to absorb.
To absorb and pay. So recent incidents you mentioned, the minister, a very competent minister we have, has spoken on a number of issues. There are technical issues and sabotage. Because he has taken TV crew to certain locations in the country where the pylons, electricity distribution towers are bombed out simply in order to sabotage government, because there are people in the country who think this government must not take credit for anything, including power.
Okay, talking about sabotage, the recent decision by the electricity workers to go on strike, this warning strike, so to speak, some read it from different meaning, give it a different meaning, looking at the fact that most of the agitations, if you like, or the demands are personal, so to speak, or have to do with the workers themselves. And then again, there are also people who felt that to avoid some of these challenges, for instance, the shutdown yesterday was set up cost government about 3 billion naira or so, just yesterday. Now, there are people who are suggesting the need to decentralize this grid so that to address this sort of monopoly. How is government keying into some of this thinking?
Well, I'm not going to delve into specific demands of labor, and I guess the minister would be dealing with that. I think that at the level of government, it is sufficient to say that there are sectors of the economy that by laws of the land, by norms existing in the country, they ought not to just walk off the sets and go on strike in the manner that they did. I'm glad that it was short-lived, and then they called it off soon thereafter. However,
the damage has been done. We're talking about 3 billion.
Of course, yes. Well, we don't know how they will deal with it. You see how the government is dealing with some other sectors. The recent, position of the government is that existing law, which says if you don't work, you don't get paid, would be applied stiffly.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting this I don't want to get involved with the electricity workers and so on, but I think that
I know you contemplated that.
There is a resolution by government to really make strike unattractive.
Right. Oh, okay. Still talking, because it's part of the economy we're talking about. I know that the government, when it came on board, is also looking at the best way to improve on the generation, just like you said, and perhaps even creating more outlets where distribution can be obtained. The concept around the AKK, that is the Jakarta, Kaduna, Kano pipeline project, was said to have been conceived to be able to power, certain power generation, power plants. For instance, the one running in, they're supposed to take up in Kudandan, somewhere in Kaduna, to power the Kakuri industrial layout, and also to supply gas to be able to also revive industries around the hubs of Funtua and Kano. And there is a serious concern now that this project might not see the light of the day. The fact that the investors are moving out, or the financiers, those providing the funds, have decided to backtrack. Is the government worried about this? Because it has significant impact on the issue of improving the economy.
Well, so they brought in so many things, and I want to say, first of all, let me say that in order that, and that's the first part of your question, government has enunciated a number of policies, including that the willing buyer, willing seller, practice in the power sector.
Right.
Now, by this, large consumers of electricity can bypass discourse and buy bulk power and for their use, so that this excess generation capacity that is available can increasingly be evacuated, without being slowed down by discourse, the lack of readiness on the part of discourse. Of course, that distribution is also addressed. You are aware that by the consent of the German government, the Nigerian government has signed an agreement and is already implementing that agreement with the Siemens power giants in the world. Siemens had done a similar project in Egypt, I believe about 16 or so years ago, and they helped them to overcome this bottleneck. And for us in this country, government has injected massive amounts of money directly from Ministry of Power, including Central Bank, which has issued money for the procurement of meters in millions of them. Now, equipment have been manufactured. Only lately, experts, engineers from the power sector were in Germany. They inspected, and in Italy, and they inspected manufactured equipment under manufacture, and then they ticked off some and said they were fine to be shipped into the country. So hopefully by September we'll begin to receive. So that would obviously now increase offtake, consumption of power, and justify the massive generation that we're able to do. Now,
the legacy projects.
Yes, the AKK. I am aware that the president is determined to deliver AKK before he leaves office. Yes, it is true we are expecting major power plants, I think about 5,000 megawatts in Kaduna, another one about 3,500. And all of the things that are building up towards the home consumption of gas, so that people will use it for cooking and household and heating, and moving us away from deforestation, because we're cutting down trees and we're exposing our environment, and the climate change impact is being felt massively across the world. And it lies actually at the heart of the problems we have in the country, whether it's Boko Haram insurgency or this thing about migration from north to south, and the conflicts also in the coastal area, forcing people to migrate to the central parts of the countries, and coming out to, create all of this confusion about settlement and people crying about indigenship and things like that. So really massive effort is going into that, and to the best of my knowledge.
What about a concern of funding, regarding funding, now that the Chinese have left?
The Chinese, I am not aware they have completely left. I am not aware of that. What I know is that the Chinese, following all of these things with COVID and the restrictions, and the fact that the economy is growing but is not growing as fast as projected, which is also a global phenomenon, because these things affected all parts of the world.
But wouldn't that affect the delivery?
So China, yes, had revised their lending policies across the world. But in particular, and there are some issues we have with the rail, Ibadan, Kaduna, Ibadan to Kano. I mean, Lagos, Ibadan is done, Kaduna, Kano, Lagos, let's say, and Mabila and a number of projects. But the government is also looking to alternative sources of funding, talking to European financiers. And in some other projects, actually, the government is also drawing from own budget, so that projects will continue and they are not stalled. But I assure you that there is a strong commitment to finish that pipeline before the administration leaves office.
Okay. Talking about funding, which is very critical. The lingering ASU strike, for instance, some would say is largely stalled. I mean, the resolution is largely stalled around the inability of government to cope out, the 1 trillion naira that is required by ASU. And lately, also issues around the new structure, of the tertiary institution workers or the lecturers, so to speak. Yes, government has been crying about funding and the paucity of funds, but the Nigerians are also worried about the leakages, there's so much leakages that are in the system. I don't know if government is looking at this. For instance, if ASU is asking for a 1 trillion naira to come back to the classrooms, and government is prioritizing payment of subsidy running into 5 trillion naira or so. And again, on the other hand, we're also having the growing, oil theft in the Niger Delta or in the oil producing areas, running into also billions. In just the first quarter or so, about $1 billion was said to have been lost. So much leakages, some would say, that is enough to plug some of these funding challenges or funding gaps. How is government looking at the need to address this, to block this leakage so that it can rechannel the funds to critical sectors like education, like agriculture and the rest of them?
Okay. Let me say that I sincerely hope that ASU is not waiting for all of the problems of this country to be solved before they resume work. A few hours ago, the Minister of Education finished an important meeting with the media at which I was present. And in his address, what he said is that actually, if ASU would care to know, the government has spent far more money than even what they are asking for. They are asking for 1.3 trillion naira as investment in infrastructure.
Continuous investment, right?
This is an administration that has spent 2.5 trillion, which is nearly double that amount of money. So that should not be an issue. Now, in a nutshell, the sense one had from the Minister of Education is that they have virtually reached understanding or agreements with nearly all of the unions except ASU on the big issues in contestation. And I think the issue with ASU, he said there are 2 more which he didn't define that they had introduced. However, the contentious one is, of course, the payment of back 6-month salary.
Whose government is not ready to.
And he said he doesn't support the president wants the law to apply, because this is the law of the land, and he didn't start with President Muhammadu Buhari. So therefore, no work, no pay policy.
Wouldn't that drag
we hope it doesn't, because if the purpose of the strike was for them to achieve certain given objectives, resolution of certain problems, I think that from the minister's point of view, virtually all of those issues have been addressed, including the UTAS, which he said actually government has found their own UTAS and one other he called P3 are even more capable, more competent than the IPs which is in place. Right. There is no decision to throw away IPs and adopt UTAS. That is for the government to do. But if the government determines that what you have given us is even better than what we have, then we can make assumptions that we are also going to see some movement in that regard. Now, people say oil theft, Niger Delta, and blockages. I would have thought that this is an administration that has done far more than any other in taking measures to stop theft before it happened. Because it's one thing to even say you're fighting corruption by means of recovery and jailing people. But it's another thing to put in place policies, and there are so many of them that are put in place. Some of them were not even initiated by President Muhammadu Buhari. They were introduced, announced by previous administration, but they were never implemented. Like the Treasury single account, like the issues of PIN numbers, personal PIN numbers, and the enforcement with all of these things, with the national ID card, and so on. So, as it is today, you know that on government platforms, you cannot issue any payment in excess of 5 million naira without you being seen, of government money, without you being seen. It has to be seen there.
But before we get to payment, talking about the source now, the oil theft at source.
The oil theft is being tackled, and you know the big problems we have in this country is that we ought to see more commitment by communities in assisting law enforcement, where communities, or even in some cases, some actors in the law enforcement process are themselves complicit. It becomes we are unable to meet our OPEC granted quotas. We used to fight OPEC, give us more quota. They give us quota, we are not able to. This is very embarrassing. And as we speak today, you know that the Nigerian Navy, the Army, they are massively involved. In fact, all of the security agencies are massively involved. I'm hoping that in the next few days, Office of the National Security Advisor will be presenting to the nation big men who are promoters of this kind of business, who are beneficiaries of it. They're being caught. And the illegal refineries are being bombed out. Crude oil is being, and the NNPC is being recovered, and the NNPC has itself installed a monitoring capacity by which they are able to detect or be advised immediately sabotage of oil pipelines happens. So these are ways that are being put in place in order to check.
Yeah, an aspect of that question was about prioritizing the priorities, so to speak. I was talking about earlier about government, not finding it difficult, to source, in spite of the challenges and the paucity of funds, to pay for subsidy that many felt is just a drain pipe, some would say. It is not making the desired impact. The fact that today the fuel queues are still present, even though they have gone down drastically, and then the rising cost of diesel, for instance, and all of that. And then you can cop out 5 trillion naira to pay for this subsidy, but you're finding it difficult to also address a genuine, concern in the education sector, talking about the 1 trillion naira, 1.3 trillion naira. How would you rationalize this?
Well, I'm not one who will advocate for the denial of rights to anyone, whether they are us or any other person. But I think one thing we need to understand is that Nigeria does not exist in an isolated position from the rest of the world that is experiencing a massive cost of living crisis. Look at our neighbors, Ghana. They are on the streets every day. Inflation in Ghana today is 31.7%. Or you look far, Brazil, 70% inflation, and it's going to hit 100%. Countries like Sri Lanka, they have melted away if care is not taken. That country will just. South Africa is in a massive crisis, and warning is that if care is not taken, that will be the next Sri Lanka. We don't hope so. That may be the next Sri Lanka on the African continent. So I'm saying to you that the government of Nigeria is perhaps the most compassionate you can ever have anywhere, and for which reason this subsidy can be removed today. But what would life be like for the lowest paid employee, for instance? You know that the minimum wage we have in the country is 30,000 naira. count the number of states that are paying this 30,000 naira. I'm sure they are not more than 50%. We are in a denial. Some, even that earlier 18,000, I'm saying to you, is not being offered. Look, I know a particular state in the country that pays 20%, 30% of monthly salary, and they say they are paying salary. In one other state or two, they have abandoned salary payment and pension for several months, and the records are there for people to see. So if you do this, it's possible it can be done. But so what would you make of the ordinary Nigerians? Yes, ASU is there, and all of us as civil servants were beneficiaries of a system that places our own well-being above the rest of the society. But what percentage of society do we?
Okay, if I understand, you're justifying the spendings, if you like. But it is the same administration. The initial impression, if you like, or the standpoint, or the position of President Muhammadu Buhari before he assumed leadership, was that the subsidy is a fraud. And why are we sustaining this fraud?
I'm saying to you that the subsidy then and this one is different.
Okay. What makes them different?
Because one, in this particular case, there is openness, there is transparency. It's there for people to see. In the past, what you had is that you could not even count what was coming in and what was going out. And so therefore, and so the money was just being taken. In particular, I remember the bell that was rung over this issue in the Senate was at a point when government had budgeted 200 billion and actual expenditure was over 2 trillion, nearly 2 trillion. You can't spend money without approval, for instance, by the National Assembly. In the case of President Muhammadu Buhari, you know that he has appropriated for subsidy in this circumstance, and when the prices went up, he went back to the National Assembly, asked for a revision of the budget in order to accommodate the projected, and I'm sure as things continue to climb up, the president will do the right thing by ensuring that subsidy is not the best for our circumstances, but it has given this country what other countries don't have, which is a little cushion, for masses of people who had suffered COVID deprivations, who are victims of all of these things that are coming from Russia-Ukraine war, and the destabilization of and the attacks by climate change. Look at what's happening in other countries. That's why it's already good to compare. Today in the United States of America, it's not the black man, even white man begs for food.
So it's a global phenomenon.
It's a global phenomenon. In Germany, look at that. People come home, they can't eat 3 times. There are people who will eat just once or 2 times in a day. And the crisis in the UK, so we are not alone. And the government is trying to manage as much as possible and to make life as easy as possible. The day will come when this subsidy will be looked at, and government, maybe our own, maybe another government, and to show you, the president had shown capacity, because in 2016, actually the president achieved parity. In fact, not only achieved parity between international and domestic prices, when prices went down, this thing was lowered for Nigerian consumer. So we had already joined the international system, but what we are seeing today is just beyond comprehension. Nobody had ever thought it would get to this point.
Okay, the summary is that we are getting result, out of the spendings, especially the ordinary people of Nigeria are feeling the impact of the spendings. Okay, it's about time we take a break. In case you're just joining us, the program is Daily Politics. And today, we're looking at President Muhammadu Buhari's government in retrospect. And we have been interfacing with Malam Garba Shehu, a senior special assistant to President Muhammadu Buhari on media and publicity. We will take a break. When we return, we'll go to the specifics. I'm sure Nigerians will want to know Malam Garba Shehu himself was talking about comparison, you know, looking at where we are before and where we are now. We'll do that when we return. Please stay with us. Thank you very much for staying with us on Daily Politics. And today we're looking at President Muhammadu Buhari's government and retrospect with Malam Garba Shehu, Senior Special Assistant to President Muhammadu Buhari on Media and Publicity. We're back, Malam, to talk more on this. Just like I said earlier on, you know, the key promises of this administration are very much known to Nigerians are three fundamental areas: security, economy, and fighting corruption. Let's start with security. The assumption is that even though the figures are hovering around 4.6, 6 point, you know, something thereabout in terms of spending in the security sector in the last 5 years or so. And the government inherited the Boko Haram insurgency in the northeast. But some would say the result of the spending is also escalation of the security issues beyond the northeast, talking about the northwest, north central, south east, and, you know, parts of the south, and even southwest. How are we going to justify the spendings, you know, huge spendings, and Nigerian taxpayers' money?
Well, I will not be in a position to give a kobo by kobo account of what money was spent. I don't handle it. I'm not in the line of expenditure.
Right.
Are there results to show?
No.
Yes, there are results to show.
Okay.
Because when President Buhari aspired to be president, he came into office, the big issue was the northeast insurgency and Boko Haram. And you know that as we speak today, the Nigerian military has achieved total dominance over northeast. And that is what is significant. Are there still incidents? Even yesterday, 24 hours ago, we heard that some harmless, hapless farmers, 6 of them, working their fields, were taken away by ISWAP. That's very sad and unfortunate. But is Boko Haram in a position to hold territory, raise flag, and claim, you know, the creation of a sovereign, you know, entity out of the Nigerian state? That is long gone. And it is true, quite a number, the pressure, the heat, excessively hot as it is for them in the northeast, they have filtered into other parts of the north and the country, which hadn't, you know, seen this kind of things before. But again, looking at what is going on lately with the fight against banditry and kidnapping, terrorism, the results are beginning to show. And we have gotten, in my view, and I think in the view of many, an important turning point. A momentum has been generated, and we are hoping that there will be no turning back. These days, all you hear from the military is they are being frontal in their activity. They are attacking enclaves, they are decimating terrorists, they are freeing, you know, hostages, and all of that. We hope that there will be no turning back in this respect. So in this respect then, public expenditure is justified, because if you didn't fight Boko Haram to what it has become today, they probably would have taken over for many more cities. You know, they were active in up to Abuja, bombing the office of the United Nations, the police headquarters, many cities, Kano, Gombe, Yola, and all of that, making life unbearable for people. So is it 100% clear? No. But substantially, they have been so degraded that you can say that the end is justifying the means. And we hope that the president, having given this directive, and he himself has said it, we have spoken to the military and they have listened. That's what he said a few days ago. They have listened and he's seen the results. We hope that this job will be done before he leaves office.
Yeah, talking about sustaining the momentum, which is very key. Nigerians are, very appreciative of the recent efforts. It is very glaring. The Ghanaian forces across board have been intensifying campaigns against these non-state actors, which is quite commendable. But some would say, it's coming with a huge price, allowing these non-state actors to grow to this level that they are beginning to even challenge the authorities we have. At some point attacking, institutions, troops, and of course threatening even the president within Abuja, which is the nation's capital. Some say allowing them to get to this level was a misnomer, looking at the fact that the fundamental responsibility of the government is actually providing security. What really happened? Was it that the government underestimated the capacity of these non-state actors, or is it that there is absence of what we are seeing today, the will to fight them?
Well, people don't like us talking about the rot that President Buhari inherited, which is a fact, because if you allow the police to decay, you allow the army to decay, you don't procure, you don't train, the day will come when you need these forces and they will not be there for you. So there's so much that has to be done to reconstruct the military, to rebuild the police, training, equipment, and even the spirit to do their work. And don't forget that even military procurements is not something like a bakery where you just go and take off the shelf. You make orders. And there are, I'll give you an example. You know that in the recent wave of successes, there's a great deal of game changing that drones have brought into the thing. And the president just said, the military said, we want Turkish type of drones, the one they call TB2.
Right.
Precision equipment,
right.
Able to carry precision equipment and to avoid radar
damage, yeah.
and all of that thing. They said, we want 4. He said, no, I will give you 6.
Okay.
But countries that manufacture, they are also interested in other theaters and they get distracted.
Okay. That's what delayed the delivery.
Yeah, maybe something like that. And we are hoping in the next, even if it is to hire, so that the momentum will be sustained. So in effect, there is a massive array of military orders and they are coming. And you need to train even the people who need to work to go and fight. And did you say spirit to fight? Is it there? Yeah, I'm not saying we are brave people, but this example perhaps will suffice. In the past, presidents allowed military army 3,000 recruitments per annum. Last year, he allowed them 15,000. This year, he said no limit. Able-bodied people will get them and train them to go to fight these rascals.
To dominate the theater.
And they are just about to graduate this set of fighters now, because the military is training. They are no longer training to post these recruits to office. They are being trained to go to the field.
The front lines.
Yes. 15,000 were sent to Falgore. After they finished the army depot thing, they were sent to Falgore to go and receive specialized kind of training that would prepare them for warfare.
Right.
As we speak to you, of the 5,000 have run away. So is a spirit there. 9,000, we hope they will be graduating. 8,000 will graduate. 5,000, they can't stand the training. So it's also another challenge.
Okay, challenge of getting the number of boots that are required to do this. But you talk about technology, which is also critical, the need to use the precision, platforms and what have you. Thank God the government is also thinking along that line. Let's talk about economy, because time has been fast spent. Reviving the economy is one of the promises. But then look at the indices. Will leave many Nigerians to wonder if actually we are making progress. Yes, you talked about the global shocks, the global economic dynamics. But looking at the statistics, they are far from, Nigerians will find it extremely difficult, to understand what is actually happening. Take, for instance, the issue of inflation. We're talking about a double digit now, almost 20% inflation. In 2014, the inflation was around 2.7%. Unemployment, at that point it was around it was less than what we have today. We're talking about 34.6% or so. 34.
For Nigeria?
Yeah, 33.
Unemployment.
33,
okay.
Unemployment is, that's unemployment. Okay. And exchange rate is around 680 to a dollar. At that point, it was around 180 or thereabout. And then the debt profile also was put at, in 2015, it was at 5.4 trillion naira. And now we're talking about 41 trillion naira. So looking at all of these economic indices, some will say we might not be getting it right. What is happening?
People who worry about this, they are cocooned in their own shells. They don't seem to appreciate what is happening globally. Look, following COVID, it's only Chinese economy that didn't go into recession. All over the world. What are we doing? Well, it's the only economy, I'm sorry to say, I should not have said they're doing good. It's the only economy that showed substantial growth.
Yeah.
And as we speak today,
about 3.11% growth in GDP.
And this was an economy that was growing at 9, 10, 11%.
That's right.
India went down. UK, you're talking about Nigerian inflation. UK is today 10.7%. United States of America is double digit. I mentioned Argentina, Brazil, Argentina, 70% inflation. And Ghana, so the thing is that when we isolate our country from what is happening, it's a global trend. And so therefore, you cannot say that Nigeria is, we're not doing as badly as, we are not in an ideal situation. We're not doing as badly as other countries are doing. And it is because there is that president, there is that government which is saying, look, let's hold the brakes. Let's be careful to manage. Yes, we are borrowing money. Tell me, which country is threatened by recession or is into recession that doesn't borrow? But that's the biggest remedy. Borrow and you spend massively so that you create jobs and you put money in the hands of people, money, they spend it and then they power manufacturing and travel and all of that thing. So we are doing as much as anybody can, perhaps more than what most others are doing in order that we sustain, keep Nigeria from going below. We've been into recession 2 times.
Yeah. So if I understand, yes, the policies are working for this government, but some say there's need to tweak or tinker with some of these policies that are not giving us the results. For instance, in the agricultural sector, yes, government is diversifying. And Nigerians are beginning to see the result of diversification in the area of rice, revolution and what have you. But still there are also concerns with regards to, getting, the price, to come down. Now we're talking about almost 30,000 naira per bag of rice, 50 kg. And the expectation was the impact of this revolution would drastically reduce the price.
Well, I'm happy you appreciate the fact that there is a vision that the president had put in place to grow what we eat and eat what we grow. if this country didn't have enough food, didn't introduce this rice program, look, and for which we spent $5 million every day in the past to import rice. These days, you are looking for rice or wheat because Russia and Ukraine, they will not even sell to you. You can't even find it. So we thank God for this vision. It has been put in place. This is one that we are talking about. I'm not justifying high cost of rice.
Because it has become staple food in Nigeria.
But also, do you know, and I'm a rice farmer as well.
Okay.
No farmer should grow rice and lose money. Because if they lose money, next year they will not grow it. That's the basic thing. So the high cost is coming, especially look at the latest NBS figures, National Board of Statistics. Actually, food inflation has slightly come down. Inflation has risen on the overall, but it is arising from non-food things like fuel, diesel, and things, and gas, cooking gas, and so on. So when all of these things are suffered, they are built into what others produce and sell. So, but on the overall, my sense is that it could have been worse than what it is. And we are in this situation because globally, nobody has been spared of this cost of living crisis.
But we're talking about reducing the pain on Nigerians, and food security is fundamental. Why is government also not considering, some sort of subsidy now, if there is any? I understand the silos were open, perhaps to push down the price down recently. But bottom line is Nigerians are concerned about, what to eat.
Subsidy is coming in various ways. Whether land clearing or actually even fertilizer. Look at all of the things that are going in many of the states, and the federal government also is making its own input. So would government, and the government is even paying out cash, which in other economies is inconceivable to the poorest of the poor, whether we consider it as meager or what. This 5,000 that is paid out to millions of our fellow countrymen who are not, it's a life changer for many, because there are people who will hold this and say, in my life I've never held as much. Yes, the inflation is unfortunate, and I hope that we'll continue to grow more food, and then climate change effect will mitigate, and the rich harvests will happen. As it is, the ongoing war against bandits and is freeing more land. So you got to know this now. Go to Borno State. The biggest headache now for Governor Zulum and the federal government together is, so how do we resettle? How do we put back people where they can be productive instead of staying in camps and being fed, by charity?
Right. I know the government has a very ambitious, plan to pull out 100 million people out of poverty. Is it? I can't remember the target now. But looking at also the statistics, some would say more Nigerians are getting into the bracket, the poverty, below the poverty line than being pulled out.
I don't have numbers to give you as I speak, but one thing I know is that by a decision of the Nigerian government, virtually all of these major contracts that go out spending money, government pegs demands that jobs to be gained be indicated. When you come to council for approval, I want this to do a road from this place. How many livelihoods will be affected? That's a key, decision of government. So, and if you see that projection, the 100 million, the Nigerian federal government itself is accountable for only about 30%. The massive private sector that we have in the country are largely going to be contributing all of the other parts.
70%.
And so therefore, well, you have to look at the circumstances in which, as we now speak, as I said, everyone is caught up in this crisis affecting cost of living. And for some, they probably might think of even shedding workers in order, to save on profit. Government is keeping a very keen eye, and I am aware that at some point, the government had vetoed a decision by some banks to retrench staff, because you just have to take it along, because the good times were there and you had it. If the difficult times are here, you just have to share also in the burden.
Okay, yes, talking about the projection and what the government is doing, again, looking at the crisis, the global economic crisis, so to speak, there is this concern that why is Nigeria taking advantage of it? So beyond just, bear the brunt, that it also presents an opportunity for Nigeria to, take advantage of the current situation to also maximize its income. For instance, in the oil and gas sector, which is largely affected, prices of crude oil has gone up, and then the fact that also there is huge demand for gas supply as a result of the shortfall. How is Nigeria keen into leveraging these opportunities?
We are, in terms of our diplomacy, of course there is a sense of decency in certain kind of things, because you don't start jumping up and down celebrating that Ukrainians are being killed because, and how do I gain, that kind of thing. But there are opportunities that have been thrown up by the crisis, say Russia, Ukraine. You don't have to go, about the market announcing that I'm here to take full advantage. Look at what is happening with, now as it is now, we have an important trajectory where two, no longer one. We used to think of how do we get money to do, Trans-Sahara pipeline that would transport the enormous gas resources from Delta
through Morocco to
Algeria or Morocco,
right,
and across the Sahel, and then sell to Europe. You know that as it is now, we are being egged on by Europe, by all, because they see chances of a closure of their access from gas, access to gas from the major supplier, the Gazprom, Russia, and all of that. So actually now there is a two-track development that is evolving. This pipeline from Delta through the Sahel to Algeria and also to Morocco, that will grow on the existing West African gas pipeline that takes gas now from our coastal, from south, through Lagos area and all of that, the capitals up to Ghana. And so we're growing that also. And chances are that funding, which had been a big issue for these major products, transatlantic and trans-Sahara, will both be done.
Right. Okay, I would have loved we talk about fighting corruption is another cardinal objective, but time has been spent. I don't know if we can talk about that in perhaps in 30 seconds. Is it a possibility to look at?
We have the important thing about President Buhari's war against corruption is the institution or the spirit in the minds of the nation. In fact, the fact that increasingly we're accepting the fact that corruption is wrong is an important achievement. Before now, it was seen as something that was normative. In the daily run of your life, you will encounter corruption, do nothing about it because it's part of life. Now there are consequences. This is the difference.
Okay, so lastly, if I understand, getting from your perspectives now, the APC government has delivered on its promises and perhaps would earn the confidence of Nigerians going into 2023. Is that the position?
Absolutely. We have no doubt about the fact that the real voters, we are not thinking about the cacophony of voices on the digital media. They don't even vote, by the way. So we are ready. We know this is how they ganged up against us in 2019. They said Buhari won't make it. Buhari won with a far larger margin in 2019 than he did in 2015. 2023, APC will do just this.
Okay. From that optimistic note, we come to the end of this conversation. Thank you very much, Madam Garba Shehu, Senior Special Assistant to President Muhammadu Buhari on Media and Publicity, for talking to us on daily politics.
Thank you. I appreciate
this
opportunity.
Your perspective. Okay. On behalf of our guests and the technical crew, this is where we come to the end of this conversation. Join us tomorrow. We'll be back with another interesting topic and personalities. Until then, I'm Shapiro Suleiman. Thank you for staying with us.